Saturday, July 4th, 2020, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Before I start, I'd like to wish all my American viewers a happy Declaration of Independence Day today. Why do I say declaration? Well, because it took 5 more years or so to win that independence. It wasn't won overnight in 1776 after the Declaration. That's a different subject, of course, to what I want to talk about today. I will also later on, though, look at George Washington. This is a very good book, An Imperfect God. But today, really, I want to talk about silver and how, in my opinion, the FT has just called a bottom in the silver market. A lot of you might know about the contrarian indicator that mainstream publications or mainstream media can be about markets, and I think this is an example of it. And before I go into the editorial written by a guy called John Dizard, I want to show you this editorial that the FT wrote. It was anonymous. There's no one's name on it. And a lot of you know about this because I've spoken about this many times. And I've told you the story of how I first saw it. And I'm not going to go through it again, but maybe I'll talk about it again another time for those of you who don't know. But here's an article or editorial from the FT from April 16th, 2004. And I did cut that article. I used to buy the FT when I used to go to work in the morning. And I cut it and I laminated it as well. And I still have it. So here it is. It says, going gold. The pointlessness of holding gold bullion continues to sink in. So at the time, gold was at $400 an ounce on that day. I even wrote the price that we were at roughly that day. And I just wanted to show you a chart of gold. So there you go. And I got the little editorial on the chart. And it says FT going gold editorial hit piece. Because basically that's what it was. It wasn't anything objective about gold. It was more slagging gold off, and those who believe in gold, the gold bugs, so to speak, like us. And you can see what gold did after that. Yeah, it did stay there around 400 for a month or two, below and above it. But I would say that was a pretty good indicator of a bottom, wouldn't you? For the next few years. I think the silver article or opinion piece by John Dizard is very similar to this opinion piece in the editorial page of the FT, 16 years ago. I even wonder whether this same guy wrote the piece about gold. It sounds the way he disparaged silver in this article sounds a lot like the way that gold and the participants in the gold market were disparaged back in 2004. So Billy, of course, was not very impressed by John Dizard. He told me this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but that's Billy's opinion. Before we start reading what this guy said, John Dizard, just wanted to show you the chart of silver here. I've done the same thing I did with the gold chart and the old editorial. So there you go, FT's John Dizard hit piece on silver. I'm not saying we're going to go up straight from here, but I think we're very near a bottom, just like gold was very near a bottom and never saw 400 again after that editorial. So let's go through this opinion, because that's what it is here, by John Dizard. It was written, or it was published yesterday. Don't bet on the silver boom. The industrial metal will not be dragged up by gold. So let's see what John Dizard had to say. If gold was the metal that drove the conquistadors mad in recent decades, silver has had the power to induce near psychotic states among its holders. I almost wrote investors, but that is too dispassionate a term for the true believers in silver. One thing I would say, the conquistadors, the Spanish conquistadors in South America, North America as well, Mexico, they were there a lot for the silver as well. They got a huge amount of silver from South America, so it wasn't just gold. Anyway, let's continue. In recent months, gold has become a respectable part of institutional core strategies, providing a useful anchor to windward in the post-coronavirus markets. That as well, I think, is not totally objective. I mean, gold has become respectable only in the recent months. I mean, that's ridiculous. Gold has been like a great investment ever since the FT wrote that editorial, or even before that. Gold was down to 250. We're now at 1700. It's had a we have had a correction since 2011, but we've had a bull market in the 21st century. I would say central banks have been buying gold more than ever before, and I don't see any of the more westernized central banks getting rid of their gold, except for a few of them, like the Bank of England through Gordon Brown, and maybe the Swiss. So there again, this guy is kind of omitting a lot of things, but let's keep going. The price of silver, though, has been left behind by the now fashionable cohort of gold bugs. Silver is still up for the year in dollar terms at just above $18 per troy ounce. The gold-silver ratio reached its all-time peak on March 18th when the silver price collapsed to $11.94. At that point, the spot price of a troy ounce of gold was worth 126.5 ounces of silver. So nothing really, just talking about the gold-silver ratio. Since then, the GSR, as Silverados would put it, has drifted down to below 100, where it has been bouncing gently since the end of May. For the silver people, the relative strength in the price of gold is a buy signal, but they believe almost anything is a buy signal. Most non-US metals people think of silver in terms of its utility for tableware, jewelry, or superior electrical conductivity. For a certain kind of American, silver is part of an ideology. Well, that's not true either, because I think people all around the world believe in silver as money. Again, he hasn't done his homework. He doesn't understand that silver has been, like gold, money for thousands of years. Even the word dollar comes from Joachim's Thaler, which was a valley in Bohemia where this nobleman started minting silver coins that eventually became Spanish dollars and then the US dollar. He doesn't realize that the word for money in French is argent, which means silver. The word for money in Spanish is plata, which means silver, right? The currency in this country here in the UK, sterling, pound sterling. Well, where sterling is a fineness of silver as well. It's sterling silver. So this guy omits a lot of stuff, of course. It goes along with owning a semi-automatic rifle with lots of spare ammunition, canned goods, conspiracy theories, contempt for urban liberals. They are way past voting Republican. The most committed are silver stackers. So there you go. That's an affront on Billy and on you and all the people who have been stacking silver, who squirrel away stacks of silver coins to trade for essentials after societal collapse. Well, I would have to say we are in kind of a societal collapse right now. Maybe Mr. Dizard hasn't been watching the news, or maybe he's just omitting it again. That's the thing about the mainstream media. They don't particularly lie, but they just omit facts. Do not argue with these people. Just back off without making any sudden or threatening moves. There you go. Your true silver believer thinks the GSR should be much, much lower than 96 or 98 to 1. And to be fair to them, Isaac Newton would agree. If he was around today, Newton believes the GSR should be fixed at 16 to 1. Metal markets professional do not share that view. CPM, an industry advisory firm. Well, before I go further, CPM is Christian Precious Metals. Jeff Christian. Jeff Christian used to work for John Aaron and Co., which was the Goldman Sachs arm, precious metals arm of Goldman Sachs in the 80s. The guy is, he's just a shill for the bullion banks, Jeff Christian. So it says, CPM, an industry advisory firm that does not trade or sell the metals or related securities, has a house view that silver prices will not sink as they did in March, but they're likely to trade above 16 and below 20. Right now on COMEX, there's a lot of contracts for the July silver standing for delivery, and I'll come to that in a minute. That is not enough to spark a silver mining boom. The newest significant silver mine at Sotkamo in Finland has not been a runaway success since it opened last year. The management, which had not reportedly fully price hedged its production, has recently changed. Mining investors are more enthusiastic about the prospects for other metals such as nickel, copper, and cobalt. As one of them says, there's much more emphasis on capital spending discipline. With silver, you have significant above ground stocks. Well, that's because it's money, like gold. Gold has a lot more. The stock to flow ratio of gold is much bigger than silver. And that is the problem for the silver enthusiasts. Yes, the world's mine output runs short of industrial investment and jewelry demand. That's true. But there are billions of ounces of silver that has already been mined and then stored as bullion or turned into retail artifacts, which can easily be melted down. That probably explains the apparent price resistance when the metal trades near 20. Well, he actually doesn't know that silver is actually trading a lot higher than 20. It's trading more like $25 or $30 in the real world. This is a guy who doesn't really know much about the silver market. He's taking opinions from people like Jeff Christian and others. The good news is that unlike gold, silver is really too cheap to be worth faking. So he's having a dig at gold because of what happened in China. But he doesn't talk about that the Federal Reserve counterfeits money every day by creating billions out of thin air, right? On the other hand, it is also too cheap to be of much interest to major banks. I don't think JP Morgan would agree with him. There is talk that JP Morgan holds a lot of physical silver. So Ted Butler has done a lot of research on that. 40 or 50 years ago, there were rafts of precious metals groups at major banks, shuttling tons of metal through their vaults. In recent years, the physical trade in precious metals has attracted too many compliance costs and scandals to be interesting to most banks. Well, it was the banks themselves, like JP Morgan, that have been involved in nefarious activity in the metals. He doesn't mention that either. Omission. Even first-rank hedge funds have difficulty getting ready access to this physical market for gold. Silver, they'll call back later. Well, he doesn't talk about the fact that the hedge funds A lot of them legally cannot own physical gold or silver. That's the way they're set up. If you ignore these cautions and are still intrigued by silver, you could be haunted by the ghost of Nelson Bunker Hunt. Almost 40 years to the day before the March crash in silver, he was forced to meet billion-dollar bank crisis-triggering margin calls for his silver positions. From the peak of Texas Rich, he became bankrupt. Well, again, he hasn't really done his research. The Hunt brothers, they started actually buying silver in the early 70s. When Nixon closed the gold window, they realized that they needed an inflation protection, and they were actually taking delivery of the physical silver. Maybe they did get a little greedy in 1980 and try to maybe corner this market. But one thing I would say, the reason they went bankrupt is not because their trade was wrong. The powers that be, the Federal Reserve, the regulators, the big banks in New York, they basically changed the rules on comex. And one day they came out and said, you won't be able to buy silver anymore. You can only liquidate silver. Can you imagine that in the market? Someone came out and said, you won't be able to buy stocks anymore. You can only sell them. Can you imagine what would happen to the price of silver on comex? And that's what they did. And that's why they went bankrupt, because the Hunt brothers challenged the Federal Reserve and its phony paper currency, its fiat currency. He doesn't talk about that, right? So actually, it was a friend of mine that I used to work with in the city who tweeted that article yesterday. I do subscribe to the FT, but I hadn't seen it, so it was good that I went and read it because of him. And then we were chatting on the private message on Twitter, and this is what he said to me in one of the messages. There are some people out there getting desperate. 65 million ounces to find for July contract, the silver contract. And I said, that's quite a bit. That's 13,000 lots equivalent. And then he gave me the article on Zero Hedge about this story. And he actually said there's another 2,000 contracts now that have been added since the article went out. So it's even more. It's 15,000 contracts. Each contract in the silver future is the equivalent of 5,000 ounces, just to let you know. I'll put it in the description as well. My friend sent to me about silver. I personally think, yeah, this is a huge contrarian indicator from the FT. The FT, of course, is a globalist publication. The globalists, yeah, you can bet they hold gold and silver quite a bit, the top globalists, but they don't want you to be involved. They don't want you to protect yourself. They want you to keep playing their debt-based fiat currency game. They want you to hold digital entries. They don't want you to hold real money. These are quarters, silver quarters, or 1964, when they were still 90%. They want you to hold nothing. They want you to hold empty promises, or I owe you nothings, as John Exter would say. So with that, I want to look at this book, An Imperfect God, George Washington, His Slaves, and the Creation of America by Henry Wieneck, or Weineck. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I read this book years ago, and I'm not going to go through it because I need to read it again if I want to give a good synopsis of the book. But I will read the introduction here in the inside jacket of the book. And I think it's really interesting, especially with what's going on today socially in the United States in the last few months. So let's go through this. It says, a major new biography of George Washington, and the first to explore his association with American slavery. When George Washington wrote his will, he made the startling decision to set his slaves free. It was the last act of a man who had begun to question his values, of a man who had come to believe that holding slaves was his only unavoidable subject of regret. Apparently, that's what he said. That's in quotes. In this groundbreaking work, Henry Wieneck explores the Founding Fathers' engagement with slavery at every stage of his life as a Virginia planter, soldier, politician, president, and statesman. Washington was born and raised among blacks and mixed-race people, and both he and his wife had blood ties to the slave community. Yet, as a young man, he bought and sold slaves without scruple, even raffling off children to collect debts, an incident ignored by earlier biographers. Then, on the revolutionary battlefields where he commanded both black and white troops, Washington's attitude began to change. He and other farmers enshrined slavery in the American Constitution, but Wieneck shows even before he became president, Washington had begun to see the system's evil. Wieneck's revelatory narrative, based on a meticulous examination of private papers, court records, and voluminous Washington archives, recounts for the first time the moral transformation that culminated in Washington's decision to emancipate his slaves. He acted too late to keep the new republic from perpetuating slavery, but his repentance was genuine. Was this perhaps related to the possibility, as the oral history of Mount Vernon's slave descendants has long asserted, that a slave named West Ford was the son of George and a woman named Venus? Using newly discovered evidence, Wieneck suggests that this could indeed be true. George Washington's heroic stature as Father of America is not diminished, but enriched in this superb, nuanced portrait. For the first time, we are able to see Washington as he was, a man both of his time and ahead of his time. So, yeah, I really recommend this book. Really good. An Imperfect God, about George Washington. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video. Billy is very excited about the prospects for silver, of course, especially after reading John Dizard's piece. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you share it far and wide as well. Also, click the little notification bell below the video to be notified of all my new videos. I make a video, well, virtually every day. And also check to see if you haven't been unsubscribed from my channel. I just noticed this morning that the subscriptions dropped by 20, which seems unusual for 20 people to unsubscribe overnight. And also think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Parlay, which I think is gonna give Twitter a run for its money. It's supposed to be an uncensored Twitter, so I would check it out, parlay.com. It's the French word, of course, for to speak, parlay. And you can also follow me on all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great 4th of July, of course, if you are in the States, and for everyone else around the world, a great weekend. Take care. Bye.